welcome. My name is Douglas Grummons. Thank you for joining me again. Today we are continuing with the reading of the book Wheels. It's a compilation of thoughts about John Lennon's song Watching the Wheels. But before we get into the reading again, we made up a short video I entitled String Theory. And there's a few things that I wanted to continue on and telling you a little bit more that I may have there's so much to think about when you're making a video. And I'm making these videos basically on the fly. I'm not scripting anything. I just speak what's in my heart and go from there. So if you haven't done so yet, look up String Theory on YouTube. It's a separate video. It's only about 15 minutes, but it's a really in-depth discussion about 11 dimensions in string theory and how they relate to us as meditators. So to add on to where I left off, I was talking about the first four chakras, the first lower chakras, the physical body, the emotional chakra, the mental chakra, and then the spiritual, which is the heart, the fourth chakra, and how they are all tied together by time and gravity. They're tied together, the first four, and because if you never go beyond the first four, then your energy stays connected with the earth. In other words, you don't move higher into the spiritual world. You stay rooted into this existence. So yeah, gravity ties down the first four, and if you never raise energy, then you're due to repeat these lessons over and over until you're ready to go and raise energy up into the fifth, sixth, and seventh chakras. And the fifth, sixth, and seventh are also in conjunction with the ninth, 10th, and 11th dimensions, like we discussed in the other video. But what's interesting is that if you stay with the first four and your energy keeps repeating through these things, you're still in seed form. So the flower is cannot bloom until the seed disappears. So that's why we say when you enter the first levels of samadhi that you disappear, because once the seed disappears, then the flower can bloom. The plant can grow and then flower, we should say. I mean, it's not that you can't experience a glimpse of samadhi in the seed form. So those might just be like dreams and stuff like that. But this is the law of existence. The seed actually comes before the tree, and then the tree comes before the flowering. And this is the journey through the seven chakras, which are the inner dimensions, the quantum level of dimensions to our existence. So always remember this: time is related with the horizontal plane, with the flatness of the earth and gravity. And then levitation is associated to the vertical plane. And these two laws work together to help you to become a balanced, beautiful, harmonizing, meditative, existing human being. And then the flowering will eventually happen. Just be patient and take your time and enjoy it, because it's going to happen. But you have to put in the effort to make this happen. But enjoy the trip. It's a beautiful experience to be raising energy through all your chakras. Like I said, I didn't really know much about chakras when I began meditating. I just experienced the energy shifts, and it's like, well, wow, what was that? But and you can shift 3, 4, 5, 6 times during a single meditation. So speaking of meditation, let's get back into the book Wheels. John Lennon sings, well, they shake their heads and they look at me as if I've lost my mind. And then I comment, and back to the text. On another surf trip, a solo surf trip, this time to Santa Cruz, I spent a week traveling up the California coast from Los Angeles to Santa Cruz. When I arrived in Santa Cruz, I was amazed by how good the surf was. I spent 3 days surfing the waves of this beautiful city, and on the second day, the spot I decided to surf was firing 6, 8, sometimes up to 10-foot walls. I had brought two two surfboards to Santa Cruz, a shortboard and my 8 foot Eaton Boneser. Um, and really, the waves were way too big for my shortboard. So basically, I was riding my Eaton Boneser most of the time. But anyway, back to the text. I took out my 8 foot long Eaton surfboard and had the best day of my life. I have mentioned this event in every book I have written. The reason I have done so is because it was a great turning point and the most important day of my life. I've had bad wipeouts many times, but this one time I botched a takeoff on a particularly large wave and got totally worked in what we call the washing machine. I was held down for what seems like minutes. I went past the point of having no air and I was being flipped under this massive wall of white water. A point came where I said, "This is it. Game over. I'm done." So I let go. I stopped fighting. I had nothing else to give. And I gave in to my self brought on destiny. I basically started to suck in water and just accepted it. And I closed my eyes and started to accept that this is the day I was going to die. And I think what happened next occurred because I had accepted my existence and let go of fear. I saw a golden light and then felt someone reach down into the water and grab my collar of my wetsuit and pull me to the surface. And when I surfaced, I looked around to thank this person for saving me, but there was nobody there. I guess it just was not my time to die. So one of two things happened. Either I really did die that day, and everything that has happened since that day has been a dream, or I lived and the dream stopped. It's not fair to the rest of the world, but after that I no longer feared death. It is because of this accident that I learned how to live moment by moment, not caring about the future and not caring about the past. By the time I came home from the surf trip, my leash had stretched an extra 3 feet. Since then, I've acted a little crazier than I used to. People have since looked at me as if I've lost my mind. I didn't lose it. I just learned how to live beyond it. I broke free from the prison that enslaved me for most of my life. Then John sings, "I tell them there's no hurry. I'm just sitting here doing time." Back to the text. The prison had broken. The very next day, something started happening while meditating which defies all logic. Now I wake up every day and I wonder why I'm still here. Not in a depressive way, but in a joyful way. I take another breath and I'm thankful for that breath. Still, I wonder why I'm still here. For years, I asked God why and never knew. All I know is what happened to me, and it was and still is love, and that there has been a deep desire to share that love. At first, I could not. I needed to learn how to share. I needed to learn how others shared their love and also wanted to learn where others went wrong. Since then, I've spent many years reading and meditating and doing everything I can, not to try to attain love, but to learn how to share it more. When I lived in Virginia Beach, I used to teach Aikido at the beach, and within my martial arts class, I would spend 5 or 10 minutes sharing all the wisdom from the masters who came before me. When I felt the time had come, I started a meditation group in the dojo after the Aikido class. Then one day, I decided to move back to Texas. When I did, I started a real meditation group. I held this group for over 3 years and met many meditators. I have learned so much and shared my love and wisdom with these fellow meditators. As much as I love those times, I was drawn back to the ocean. So I moved to Galveston Island, and this was when I was drawn into writing. I realized I could reach so many more souls by sharing wisdom through the written word, and now the podcast. So anyway, to this day, I'm still amazed that I'm still here. After all that had happened to me off the coast of California, every moment I'm ready to die. God could take me today and I would not complain, because living moment to moment to me is the wisdom of a fool. I would say I'm just sitting here doing time, not living in it or caring about the past or the future. I have thrown myself out of an airplane more times than I can remember. I've surfed in the middle of horrific thunderstorms with lightning crashing all around me. I've been so close to sharks that it made others around me bolt to the beach while I turned and just kept riding waves. And I don't do these things because I have a death wish, but because I have tasted death. And when I did, I shed my fear of it. I learned how to live with no aspirations or hurries, just living in the Tao. Maybe this story will help you to understand. Once I was skydiving back in Virginia. I used to skydive in Suffolk, Virginia, and I partnered up with a fellow named Buck. Buck was a good guy and always said a prayer on the plane before he jumped. Although a lot of skydivers will not admit it, I think they all say an inward prayer before they go. You can see it in their eyes when the plane takes off. And for the first 1,000 feet, everyone is so silent. A couple guys ask themselves why they're doing this, or others are focused and driven, thinking about the beautiful skydive or how beautiful the skydive will be. Buck and I went over the jump on the ground several times, on the ground in hopes that it would turn out similar in the air before Manifest called us to board the plane. The ride up to altitude took about 15 minutes. Once the plane got to about 10,000 feet, everybody checked their gear and donned their goggles and helmets. After that, Buck, being a devout Christian, asked everybody if they wanted blessings. And several guys took him up on the offer, saying, "Hey, I'll take a blessing." "Oh, yeah, me too." One guy in the back of the plane said, "Me too. Give me one." Then Buck asked, "Hey, Doug, how about you?" And I said, "No, I'm good." He looked at me with a quirk, raised his eyebrows, and said, "Okay." For the most part, the jump went well. While we were falling, I noticed Buck was not doing what we had planned. Maybe he was too excited, or he couldn't seem to focus on the jump. When we separated and pulled our parachutes, then we separated and we pulled our parachutes. And once we landed, I'm jumping out of the text a little bit, but I remember that I had landed first, and then I looked over at Buck, and he was lying on the ground, not moving. And I ran over to him and I shouted, "Buck, Buck, are you okay?" And he replied, "No, my ankle. I think I broke my ankle." Now, this is not a lesson smearing someone for having faith. I'm all for 100% for someone having faith. The reason I said no to the blessings was because when I jump, it's not me who jumps. I give myself to God and I let Him jump. You don't need blessings when God is doing the jumping. No matter if all goes well or if the shit hits the fan, when God jumps, you are complete and completely centered. When you are centered, you can accept your surroundings and whatever they may be, and then focus on the present moment or the task at hand. When I paddled out into the waves, into the thunderstorms, no one dared go out that day. We had not seen waves in several weeks, and I really wanted to surf. If lightning strikes within 50 feet of you, then the ocean boils, and you can be severely burned. Lightning instantly boils the water, and you can get third-degree burns. Still, nothing was going to stop me from surfing that day. So I grabbed my board and I paddled out. I caught several waves before a couple of other guys, as crazy as I was, paddled out and looked over. I looked over at them and I said, "Yeah, it's a good day to die." After 30 minutes, several more guys joined us, and I think the front finally blew through, and we had waves, and everybody was happy. Anyway, back to the text. Again, it was God who was riding those waves that day, not me. The difference is in quality, what you are giving back to God. The greatest prayer you can ever present is your life and the life you live. Somehow you've been dubbed into thinking that you are separate from God, and this is just bad programming. The feeling of separation is not natural. Separation only exists when you think God is a line and you are not part of that line. It's an illusion created by pseudo religions. True religions will help you to dissolve the artificial space or distance between you and God until the illusion of space or distance no longer exists. I recently watched a documentary called I Am, put together by a fellow named Tom Shadyac. He is a famous film director, living the life of luxury, and then one day Tom had a life-threatening experience which forever changed him. The outcome of his accident brought about one of the best documentaries I had ever seen. Tom went and interviewed some of the world's greatest minds to help figure out what's wrong with the world and ask how can we fix it. Tom went to some of the world's most famous spiritual minds in search for answers, and after interviewing these great minds, something inside of him started to change. His view from what was wrong with the world changed. He began to see what was right with the world. The first point Tom made was that we as humans do not have razor sharp teeth or large claws to survive. We are very weak if you compare us to other animals. Yet we have survived hundreds of disasters and hundreds of wars. The reason we're able to survive all these years is because we are able to cooperate. This one thing alone has been our saving grace. This cooperation is in every species on our planet because it is in everyone's DNA. In the beginning of the film, researchers observed antelope grazing in the fields, and they wondered how the antelope, as a herd, and what time they decided to go to the watering hole. If part of the herd left for the watering hole too soon, then part of the herd could be left behind. If the herd left too late, then darkness could inhibit the herd from reaching the watering hole. So scientists placed cameras around the grazing areas to watch this and see how the herd knew when to go to the watering hole. What they observed was that altogether it was a democratic decision made by the herd. One antelope at a time would raise its head and look towards the watering hole, and then several would raise their heads and look toward the watering hole. Then once 51% of the herd looked at the same watering hole, the herd would move towards that direction to the watering hole. They watched time after time, and it was the same. Then the researchers noticed this democratic system occurs in many animal species, and our population is no different. Humanity could make a huge change as soon as 51% of the population shifts towards cooperation, whether for good or bad or for the rest of humanity shifts with it. Tom was a great soul, who would have agreed with John Lennon because he too had stepped off the merry-go-round. Once he had millions of dollars and a large mansion and everything he could ever want, just to find that money did not make him any happier. Tom states in his documentary that wanting more money than you need is a disease. He calls it a mental illness. The desire to be on the merry-go-round is a disease, but as long as the majority convinces everyone that it is normal, then almost nothing can be done. I say almost nothing because there is a chance. If we can behave like the first antelope in the documentary, pointing the way to the watering hole by pointing the way towards enlightenment, a change can be made. The shift has to be democratic, and it has to be made by a few brave souls one at a time. There have been many attempts at a global shift by revolutionaries, but still the majority prefers to stay on the merry-go-round. Eckhart Tolle and Oprah Winfrey have attempted to make a global shift with one blow, but Oprah Winfrey has an enormous pull with half of the world's population. Eckhart Tolle is an enlightened master, and together they have successfully changed some lives, but we have not experienced a global shift. The reason the world did not experience a global shift is because each person must first feel the shift within themselves. The mob mentality has no consciousness. This democratic shift in humanity can only happen to individuals. Within you, there are millions of cells. With the practice of meditation and awareness, one cell at a time shifts. And just like the antelope's attention, as soon as 51% of your cells make the shift into a higher consciousness, then the remaining 49% give in. Once this shift happens, you will experience enlightenment. The shift is democratic within your own being, one soul at a time. Once 50% of the population makes the shift, one soul at a time, then we'll experience a global shift in this world, starting with you. Be warned, the powers to be do not wish this to happen. If it happens, then they will not be able to control you. These politicians and the old dead Fasuedo religions depend on your contentment. They say the way you are living is God's plan. God's plan is not for you to live a life of suffering or a life of anxiety-ridden pain from not knowing flight. And when I use the word flight, I mean not knowing God. If you feel contentment in the nest, then you'll never have a desire to leave it. When you let other people make decisions for you or control your behavior, this is my meaning of being in the nest. Imagine a world where there were no wars or no famine, because an aware person or an aware society would not allow these things to exist. 51% of society would have to pass through the first 4 levels of understanding before this type of society could even exist. If even just our leaders did this, then society would be benefited so much. But our leaders are all still dwelling on the first, meaning they are all blinded by fear and driven by ambition and greed and power. But they're still riding on the merry-go-round, and they are the ones who want you to stay on as well. I'm going to go over my 20-minute mark just a little bit and share these last thoughts out of the book. So back to the text. There's one other thing in Tom's documentary that I'd like to mention. Scientific research has stumbled upon something in the East is known for thousands of years. A lab called HeartMath found that the heart receives messages from existence before the brain. Researchers measured electromagnetic signals put out by subjects' hearts and brainwaves, and researchers would show a picture of something neutral to the observer while hooked up to a machine with electrodes measuring signals from both the heart and the brain. When they would show a picture of something the viewer would be alarmed by, they found that electromagnetic responses within the heart can precede the responses within the brain whenever the subjects were presented with startling images. What was amazing was not only did the heart respond first to the heart also knew it would be shocked before they even showed the horrific picture. What this means is the heart somehow has a connection with which is capable of foreseeing the future for about 3 seconds. Not only that, but in between the beats of the subject's heart, they can measure if another person was giving off love, hate, or anger before the subject perceived it in the brain. They also found emotion is contagious and suggests that this is how the mob mentalities are formed. You know when you step on an anthill and all the ants go crazy. The same holds true for humans. If one person goes crazy with anger, then several people can go into a rage without even knowing why. I feel the reasons news broadcasters keep showing violence in news is to control our emotions. We see news in other countries that shocks us, setting off sensors in our hearts. Then when our government sees or feels the shock, then they take action. Wars are started out of mass hysteria. And I'm not saying we should not be shocked by violence. I'm saying we should not let these acts of violence turn us into a swarm of enraged ants. We are human beings, and we should not behave like ants. There is one exception to this contagious anger that from the mob mentality, and that is with the enlightened person. With the enlightened person, there's no room in the heart for hate. The heart is so full of love, and it keeps pouring in from all directions. When there's no room for hate and only love exists in your heart, you constantly pour that love onto other human beings. When you are around an enlightened person, just be receptive. Open your heart and let the electromagnetic frequencies from his heart reach yours. If you can do this, you will feel love and bliss like never before. It is in our DNA to react to situations, but a meditator or a Buddha does not react to a situation. He responds. And responding is different from reacting. A reaction is an automatic function, and a response comes from when a person is not moved from his center and then acts exclusively out of his consciousness. This is why Jesus could say, when someone hits you, turn the other cheek and offer it up to him. Rather than reacting and lashing out or lashing back, he says, turn the other cheek. Just because someone else is full of negativity does not mean his negativity has to be in you. Learn to respond instead of reacting. A response comes from your being and not from the mind. And this is why I say Jesus was a Buddha. He was an enlightened soul. Jesus was able to step back and become aware of the functioning of the wheels. One wheel full of anger and others are full of greed. Well, folks, I think we should wrap it up at about right there. Thanks again for joining me. My name is Douglas Grummons. I look forward to the next reading, part 5. Anyway, thanks again for spending the time to listen to my words, and I hope we can gain some great insight from all these lectures and discussions that I'm sharing with you. Again, thank you again for joining me. My name is Douglas Grummons. Please look up my other works, 10,000 Waves was my first book, and Songs of the Buddhas was my second book. And hopefully one day I'll have this Wheels put out. I mean, I'm in no hurry to put out the books because I'm not making a fortune of money off of them, and I'm not doing this for the money. So I'm just doing it to share love with all my friends. Anyway, thank you.